today has been a commemoration event for the death of Shelley, which occurred around 200 years ago, well, exactly 200 years ago, not quite to the day. And what we have done today is put on a series of events celebrating his life. We began with a lecture about his school days, proceeded to some recitations, declamations of his verse, and then there have been a series of tours of the school grounds where Shelley walked and talked and was taught and swam, and also we've had an exhibition in College Library, which is where I stand now.
Today's lecture was called Romantic Rebel, Shelley's Etonian Days. I think the things that most interested me, because they haven't been gone into in such detail in the biographies, and certainly not in the contemporary accounts of his time at Eton, was his participation in the strange traditional ceremony of Montem, when the school gathered and dressed up in fancy dress and paraded along with the King and the Queen to Slough, to Salt Hill, where they had some strange flag-waving ceremony, and it all culminated in a great big feast. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Shelley was, of course, a Republican, a pacifist. The idea of soldiers and swords were complete anathema to him. But in 1808, he was sufficiently senior in the school to be one of the boys who would be dressed in military uniform. So in 1808, when he was about 17, Shelley would have been dressed in a plumed helmet, a red coat, white breeches, and carrying a sword, i.e. dressed like a British military officer. And that sort of comes pretty strangely when you think of the later image of him as being a pacifist, anti-army, anti-violence, and so on. Particularly interesting really was our visit towards what's called Sixth Form Bench, which is a bench by the river and is shown on a map of 1798, which is here in the library. You can actually see the bench on the map, and although the woodwork has been replaced over the centuries, we know that that's where Shelley, as a sixth former, as a special privilege with his friends, could go and sit on that bench by the river and discuss poetry or whatever they'd like to do. And it is very close to a lovely little walk past a pond, which is called Poet's Walk, where he would have gone with his friends. It's not actually named after him, it's named after one of his favourite poets, the old Etonian Thomas Gray.
So Eton College Library is our archive, and it's a working archive, so we continue to make acquisitions each year. And in fact, half of the items that you see around me were acquired in the past probably 20 to 30 years by Michael Meredith. So we've got around 40 objects and texts on display, so a combination of first editions, manuscripts. We have a bust of Shelley, we have a painting by Seven, and we also have Keats's death mask. So what we wanted to do was to not only have an exhibition that illustrated the rich and exciting life that Shelley led in books and in literature, and his association with other writers and thinkers, so particularly Keats, because this is a Keats-Shelley Memorial Association event, but also Byron and also Leigh Hunt and Leigh Hunt's wife, who carved one of the most impressive busts of Shelley. In fact, the only one we have, the only likeness we have, where someone who really knew him well carved a bust. The other bust by Story, which is in Upper School, is not from life.